Mormons are obsessed with Disney, and anytime I run across Disney content online, whether it's through Disney Adults or a family trip that's being vlogged, I usually click through, and I swear that 9 times out of 10, the content being created was created by members of the Mormon Church. Just about every single well-known Mormon influencer has at some point made content around Disney, and before you call me crazy for linking Disney and Mormons of all things, just know that I have a Mountain Kingdom-sized mountain of evidence to back up my claim here. Obviously, people from all walks of life may very well be Disney adults, but I swear that if you grew up Mormon, you have a significantly higher chance of becoming a Disney adult than the general populace. Growing up, my family was definitely no exception to this Mormons loving Disney rule. I have so many memories of Friday or Saturday nights we'd get to watch a Disney movie. Back then we used to have the VHS tapes, and I remember pushing it into the cassette player with so much anticipation. When I attended BYU, my experience there also revolved around Disney. There were so many nights that me and my roommates would stay up just watching Disney movies. I cannot tell you how many times I saw the movie Tangled while attending BYU. So that was my college experience. It was mostly watching Disney movies or playing apples to apples. Despite my love of Disney growing up, it did ignite some conversations around morality. Basically, we would talk about how some of the princesses were not modest enough. Specifically, Ariel and Jasmine are the 2 princesses I remember having the most conversations about, and how they were showing their midriff, and that's not the standard for us in our family. This was also probably piggybacking off of the ban on the movie The Hunchback of Notre Dame in my family, because Esmeralda dances for money and she's a woman of the night was like the primary critique of the movie. So we definitely weren't allowed to watch all Disney movies, and even the ones we were allowed to watch did come with a lot of conversations around them. This connection between Mormons and Disney is well established enough that there are multiple articles you can find about this online. There is this article from BYU's newspaper. It says, "Opinion: BYU's Disney obsession is really strange. I happen to agree." From LDS Living, we also have 8 surefire ways to spot a Mormon at Disneyland. We also have this from LDS Living. It says, "The Mormon fascination with Disney." And there's even this scholarly article that's written just about the history between Mormons and Disney and the Mormons who were employed at Disney throughout Disney's history. This is called The Mormon Influence at Disney. I'll be reading from some of these articles for this video, and I'll also link them below if you wish to peruse for yourself. I also just don't think I'm the only one drawing this connection. I saw this on Reddit the other week, and it says, "Why is Disney at all shoving Mormonism down our throats?" The post lists some of the most major Mormon media moments we've had over the last few years. Obviously, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is the most notable and was the biggest. That was made by Hulu, but Hulu is owned by Disney. We just found out that Taylor, Frankie Paul, she's going to be the Bachelorette next season. And then currently on this season of Dancing with the Stars, we have 2 of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives women on Dancing with the Stars. They just had a Disney night. Jen was Jasmine, and her husband was dressed up like Jafar in the crowd. Whitney did the foxtrot. And so it really can feel like a deluge of Mormons in the media right now, and I understand the point of the post. It's also worth noting that it seems like at least half of the actual dancers on Dancing with the Stars are Mormon or used to be Mormon, and they learned to dance in Utah. The list keeps going with moments that connect members of the church to Disney. These are some of the most wild images made by AI, in my opinion. They depict Mormon missionaries visiting Disney princesses to share the gospel with them. In these images, as you can see, the elders are bringing the word of the Book of Mormon to Disney princesses. We have them talking to Ariel. I also think it's hilarious that when you zoom into the copies of the Book of Mormon they're holding, it's just like AI dribble. It doesn't actually say the Book of Mormon. We also have Jasmine. We also have Tiana, Moana. We have Mulan, and of course Rapunzel. And the missionary has literally climbed up, I guess we're meant to assume, the missionaries climbed up Rapunzel's hair to bring her another testament of Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, I think a lot of these princesses are going to be a bit bummed to find out they have to wear religious underwear, which is not compatible with their princess outfits. I also found other images that are created by members of the church that are the princesses themselves becoming missionaries. This was my favorite. It's Belle, who famously loves to read saying that the Book of Mormon is her favorite book. And while all of those AI images are pretty unhinged, I think I found something that pretty easily beats those images on the insanity scale, and it's one of the most famous Mormon influencer families just had a baby, and they literally named their baby Disney. And this is the video. The comments are turned off, but to name your child Disney does kind of mean you've cast yourself into such a high level of Disney obsession that I don't know if there's much that's going to parallel that. This clearly follows a trend amongst Mormon influencers, which is to name your children the most creative names you can think of, either really kind of strange or out there names, or just having names that all have the same sounds or start with the same letters. It's very common amongst Mormons, but I think that it's clear that this was a controversial baby name because they literally turned the comments off on the video. While I know it's impossible to top a Mormon influencer family naming their child Disney, I think my favorite example of Mormons and Disney meeting together is the Book of Mormon Musical, where Elder Price says that he wants to go to Orlando on his mission. To read from the script, he says, "When I was 9 years old, my family took a trip to Orlando, Florida. This is the most wonderful, most magical place I had ever seen. I said to myself, this is where I want to spend eternity." And then later there's a song about how all of the missionaries are anticipating where they're going to go on their mission, and Elder Price is like, "Orlando, I love you, Orlando, SeaWorld and Disney and putt-putt golfing." This is, of course, right before he discovers that he's being sent to Uganda, which is, the storyline of the rest of the musical. So needless to say, there are many different things you could point to in popular culture where either influencers or members or South Park is drawing this connection, and it's a connection that actually goes pretty far back. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was something called Mormon Night at Disney. This was something sponsored by Disney. Here's an example of one of the flyers that came from during this period of time. And I think it's so funny that right next to Mickey Mouse, it says, quote, "LDS standards to be observed." During this time, members of the church got discounted tickets to Disney. They also closed the park early and then let basically members only into the park during the special Mormon Night. And so this was a pretty official thing with the park. A member of the Mormon church was actually instrumental in the design of Mickey Mouse himself and Mickey Mouse's character development. This man is named Floyd Gottfredson, and he was a member of the Mormon church. Disney was founded in 1923, and Floyd was hired in 1929. And so this is a relationship that pretty much goes back to the founding of Disney. To read from this article, it says, "Gottfredson would produce the Mickey Mouse comic strip from 1930 until he retired from Disney in 1975, nearly 50 years later. This man, as well as a lot of other members who got their start at Disney, are the reason that Brigham Young University has a pretty massive animation program." But just in case you still don't believe that there's a connection between Mormons and Disney, I'd like to enter another piece of evidence for your consideration. We're going to use Google Trends here. I use this usually whenever I talk about Mormons and culture. I feel like it's a pretty good way of figuring out what Utah, really anything Utah is interested in, will show you what Mormons are interested in. Utah is where the Mormon church is the largest. It's also the highest concentration of Mormons in the country. And so anything that Utah ranks for is usually a pretty good indicator of what Mormons are interested in. A good benchmark for this is the term coffee. If you look up coffee and then see how Utah ranks amongst the other 50 states, Utah in the last 5 years was 47th for the term coffee, which is because coffee is against the word of wisdom and considered a sin. So based on this, I was very curious to see where Utah ranks amongst the 50 states for the search term Disney. I went into this search with a theory about where it would rank because obviously Disney World is in Florida, Disneyland is in California, so I figured Utah, if anything, had to at least be number 3 because the search volume in those states for the search term Disney had to be higher than Utah. Drum roll please, here are the results for the search, and as you can see, I was actually wrong. wrong because Utah ranks above even California. This is also adjusted for population. Utah ranks for the #2 search volume in all of the country for the term Disney. I figured I'd also try with the search term Disneyland, and Utah also ranks above California for interest in Disneyland. So Utah, of all of the 50 states, has the highest search volume and interest in the term Disneyland. I just think it's crazy that people in Utah have more interest in Disneyland than the people who literally live in California. And so all of this is to say that Mormon Disney Mania is a very real thing. And so in today's video, I'm going to share some of my own personal experiences growing up Mormon and being around Disney and conversations about Disney all the time. I'm going to share how Mormon influencers definitely feed into this frenzy. We'll talk about the history of the Mormon Church and Disney as a company, and I'll also share some cultural observations about why Disney and Mormons go together like peanut butter and jelly, or maybe it would be more appropriate to say they go together like Minnie and Mickey Mouse. Before we jump into the rest of the video, just a quick reminder to like this video, drop a comment if you've seen Mormons and Disney in the wild somewhere. Don't forget to subscribe. I have a new video about the Mormon Church, whether it's the doctrine or pop culture or history, every single week. And don't forget to hit the bell button so you get a notification when I post. If you enjoy this video, you may also like my Patreon video. I decided to have a separate complete video about the Mormon Disney Princess Complex. It's already posted and linked below. I just talked about how Mormon girls are meant to view their weddings as like the most important thing in your life, how it's kind of a happily ever after sales pitch, and girls are the damsels in distress, and the boys are the knights in shining armor, and how there's a lot of parallels to be drawn between Disney princesses and Mormon purity. So that's already posted if you want to check that video out after this one. Let's chat about why it is that Mormonism and Disney fit together so well. And I think the heart of this thesis is specifically around this focus on happiness. So for Disney, the tagline is the happiest place on earth. And in Mormonism, there is a very intense focus on being happy. And sometimes that really veers into a lot of toxic positivity in my mind. There's a lot of songs that come to mind here. The first is one that I would sing as a child, so it's forever ingrained into my psyche. First, we would draw a little face. It would look like this. And this is the song. If you chance to meet a frown, do not let it stay. Simply turn it upside down and smile that frown away. The second verse is, no one likes a frowny face, change it for a smile. Make the world a better place by smiling all the while. And so for me, the highly manufactured happiness that's found at Disney it's not real. The town you walk through, the castle you see, none of it is real. It is all an illusion. None of it are actual villages where anybody lives. The castle is just made for taking photos in front of. So for me, this highly produced happiness that you find at Disney, that you literally pay through the nose to experience. Disney is so expensive. We're gonna get into that too. This happiness is not real. It's all based in fantasy. And for me, it feels highly reminiscent of the happiness that I experienced as a Mormon kid, which isn't really inherent joy as much as it is about the appearance of happiness. Another song I was thinking of as I was planning this video is the song Come Come Ye Saints, which is a song that they used to, basically at BYU, there's like a bell tower, and then the bells would have this melody of this very specific song at the top of every hour. And it's basically, to me, the lyrics are saying that you should be happy in your toil. You should just say all is well. And to me, it teaches you to deflect any feelings of sadness or fear. Any negative feelings are not of God, which in effect is to say that being unhappy is sinful. If you're unhappy, you're simply not experiencing sufficient faith, because anyone who has enough faith in God should never experience sadness. I'm going to sing a few lines from this song, but I suggest going and reading the lyrics if you want the full effect. It says, "Why should we mourn or think our lot is hard? 'Tis not so, all is right." Imagine being a literal pioneer pushing a handcart and someone's telling you, like, you think this is hard? 'Tis not so. everything's fine. I think I'd be like, it's obviously not fine. And I know that the response to that is obviously like, oh, well, if you just are grateful for what you do have, or if you think positively, then maybe it's going to improve your situation. I get it, but this like good vibes only point of view, I actually think ultimately is kind of harmful, because you're basically disassociating from the lived human experience, which is that sometimes we're going to feel not so good, and that's okay. It's okay to not feel very good. This is another kicker in the 4th verse. These are the lyrics. And should we die before our journey's through, happy day, all is well. And then it goes on to basically say like, oh, when you die, you just go to heaven, so all is well, all is well. But to bring it back to Disney as the happiest place on earth, that's such a big claim. Parents, like this article was very interesting, parents are literally going into debt, sometimes thousands of dollars into debt, to give their children the Disney experience. And something about crippling yourself financially doesn't exactly vibe happiest place on earth, but as a parent, there's this immense pressure to provide this experience to your children. Even if there's kicking and screaming, they're tired from the flight, the parents are stressed because everything's so pricey and because they're also trying to enjoy themselves, and the lines are long and it's kind of hot, and the matching shirts, somebody just spilled something on it, so now there's a stain, and it really builds up in your mind this idea that at Disney, you should have this perfectly happy time, as the tagline, the happiest place on earth, would suggest you're meant to be having. But behind the surface, there's a lot of like repressed anger that I think happens on some of these Disney trips when the reality of Disney does not meet up to this incredibly high expectation. And so we see in both Disney and Mormon doctrine this desire to disassociate from your negative feelings, because you feel like the only acceptable emotion in the church and at Disney is happiness. However, I think even for those who are experiencing the happiness, it's quite sterile happiness. Before we continue, I'm excited to announce this week's video sponsor, which is HelloFresh. And I don't usually give brands second chances, but in this case, I'm glad I gave HelloFresh a second chance. If you've watched my content for a while, you know that I've tried HelloFresh before. I liked it, but there were certain meals that we would end up skipping because my kids didn't want to eat it, and this would lead to random grocery trips at the last second or unhealthy takeout. I gave HelloFresh a second chance because they've doubled the size of their menu, and they've made it easy to swap out veggies and proteins, so it's easier for me to customize something that my family will love. When I tried HelloFresh in the past, a lot of the options were chicken, and now they allow you to add steak or seafood at no additional cost, which makes it so that we can have more variety during our meals. I love all of the fresh updates that HelloFresh has been making, and I think you will too. And if you want to give a second chance to HelloFresh, you can use my code AlysaFM at HelloFresh.com, and that will get you 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. That's 1 free meal per box with an active subscription. Free meals applied as a discount on the first box, new or returning subscribers only, and it varies by plan. Sign up today by clicking the link in the description box or scanning this QR code, or you can go to HelloFresh.com and use my code AlysaFM. And now let's get back to our chat. On the Disney side of this, I think this is manifest by just how much Disney sanitizes fairy tales to always ensure that perfect happily ever ending, even if the actual original historic story that has been passed down through folklore and has been told by many different cultures, usually the Disney version of that is so far removed from the original story, it's laughable. To give a few examples, in the real story of Cinderella, the stepsisters cut off their feet in order to be able to fit into the glass slippers, and at the wedding, birds peck out their eyes as punishment. In Snow White, the evil queen is forced to dance herself to death at the wedding, and she's wearing these red hot iron shoes. We do not see that in the Snow White depicted by Disney. I think for me the most famous is the Little Mermaid. In the original Little Mermaid story, the Little Mermaid turns into sea foam, and she does not get her happy ending. And so we see this Disneyification of all of these old stories where they take the names and the characters and maybe the basic storyline, and then they sanitize it to the point of you almost don't even recognize it if you were to read the original story. And it's all in the name of providing the happily ever after effect and ensuring that the viewer gets the warm fuzzies throughout the movie. Another great example of this sanitizing effect of Disney is the personas of Disney children. There's so many young children who are Disney celebrities. They act in the shows. They always have the perfect smile. They're always doing the little wand thing. As a kid, when I would watch the Disney Channel and see these children, I felt like they were perfect. They must have lived perfect lives. And that was all smoke and mirrors. And really for most of them, once they become adults, we see this huge controversy around them sharing how they were treated as children. Many of them talk about being abused. Many of them talk about how their parents were just using them for money and fame. And this picture-perfect image of the Disney child becomes this adult with a ton of mental health issues who in some cases struggles to even continue onward in their career as an adult. Some examples of this are Miley Cyrus as Hannah Montana, we have Demi Lovato, we have Lindsay Lohan. Probably the most famous example of this is Britney Spears. She got her start in Disney too. And so for me, child stars are a perfect example of this pristinely manicured sense of perfection and happiness when there is in reality something really dark going on beneath the surface. To bring this sanitized, whitewashed version of things to the Mormon church, I think we also see this Disneyfication in how the church relays its history. Some examples of this are the folk origins of the church, the fact that Joseph Smith was peeping in a rock to find buried treasure before he wrote the Book of Mormon, and that he was dragged into court over his treasure digging. We have polygamy. As a kid, I was taught that the reason polygamy happened was because a lot of men died in war, and some of the other living Mormon men, just a few of them, it was very small, only a few people took those women in under their wing and took care of them. Never learned that Joseph Smith had over 30 wives and that a lot of them were underage and that some of them were mother-daughter pairs and one of them was pregnant and a lot of them were married concurrently currently married when Joseph Smith approached them to secretly marry him. And I talked about all of that in this video if you want to learn more about Joseph Smith's polygamy. But the idea of Joseph Smith as this man who's secretly marrying a 14-year-old is so far away from the representation of Joseph Smith as this kind, loving prophet and man of God that I grew up with. It feels like a Disneyfication to me. Basically the same comparison, which is that the stories that Disney tells on the big screen and animated and all pretty and happy are just not the actual stories that have existed in different cultures throughout time. For me, the reason why it's so odd to see adults be obsessed with Disney, because it is simply, first of all, just because it is meant for children. And the reason that they sanitize things and make them so simplistic is because they are ultimately meant for children. The idea of the evil queen dancing herself to death probably wouldn't necessarily belong in a children's movie, or if it was, a lot of parents might boycott it. And so I can understand making things simplistic for children. But the reason why it's so odd to see so many adults obsessed with Disney, when I was a BYU student, a college student obsessed with Disney, is that there's a level of simplicity there, that there seems to be a lack of desire to become an adult. Part of adulthood is complexity. Part of adulthood is nuance. It's being able to face the fact that Joseph Smith was a polygamist, that the Book of Mormon has racist passages, that Joseph Smith said he could translate the Book of Abraham, and no Egyptologist or any historian has ever said his translation was correct. Those are simply facts. But the Mormon Church, I think, does a Disney by whitewashing things to the point that they're almost unrecognizable. And the only function of learning about church history is to give you the warm fuzzies. They take away anything that might make someone think, why did he do that? That doesn't seem too good. They remove all of the negative stuff, and all that's left is the fluff that gives you the warm fuzzies. And that's the same thing that Disney does to their movies. Because they're meant for children, But when adults seem to be so interested in embracing the media meant for children, you have to wonder what's going on in the mind of the adult, that they can't seem to quite face the reality of being an adult and having nuance and having complexity and sometimes having bad feelings, but rather reverting back to this place that appears to simply be escapism. And maybe escapism is, I think everyone can have escapism to some extent, but when that's your entire personality, when being obsessed with Disney is something you're watching the movies, you're going to the parks, you're wearing the Disney ears at home. And I think this is why people make fun of Disney adults in general, is that it's the Peter Pan syndrome of it all. It's that the lack of ability to grow up, which in small doses is maybe, I think more acceptable. But when you literally won't grow up, when you literally won't face reality, and you're just trying to always be in Never Never Land, then it seems like there's something that is being repressed in your mind that is not allowing you to embrace what it means to be an adult. And in case you think I'm just making all of this up and this connection between the Mormon doctrine and view of happiness and Disney as the happiest place on earth, I'm going to read from this article. This is a blog post, and the author says this: "There's something about Disney that strikes at the heartstrings of Mormons everywhere." She goes on to say, "Perhaps it's because there's something inherently good in Walt Disney's dream, appreciating the sweet magic of children and trying to reclaim that purity and hope in the world. We are a people who, after all, strive to become more childlike. Why wouldn't such an appreciation of good speak to us?" And this reminds me of a oft-quoted scripture from when I was growing up. This is from Matthew, and Jesus said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for such is of the kingdom of heaven." And there are other scriptures that are similar, like children are an heritage of the Lord. And I think being meek and being childlike is held up as a value, a virtue in Mormon society, because children are considered innocent. So it's not like in other Christian faiths where there's like original sin. In Mormonism, you are clean, clean as a sheet, white as a dove, whatever the analogy is you want to use. You are considered sinless until you turn 8, which is the age of accountability, which is why I, as a kid, wanted to avoid my 8th birthday as much as possible, because before you turn 8, you're considered perfectly pure. And I think that's also why members of the church buy into this idea so much of being childlike is a virtue, because it shows that you're still perfectly pure and you haven't been tainted by sin yet. I think for me, something about adults obsessively loving something meant for children, to me, can scream stunted emotional growth. I do enjoy a Disney movie every now and again with my kids, or just media for children. But once it's bedtime, I'm not watching a Disney movie after my kids are in bed. And I think for me, part of being an adult is being able to embrace nuance and shades of gray, and that there is violence in the world. There's a lot of horrible things happening in our world. And rather than being an ostrich and putting your head in the ground so that you can watch Moana for the 800th time. And I think part of being an adult is just grappling with reality. Reality has all of those things. Reality isn't, the happiest place on earth. It's not happily ever after. Reality sucks sometimes. And that's it's okay for things to be bad. It's okay to feel badly about things. It reminds me of stories of Mormon funerals, how there's this insistence that even at a funeral, you should still be happy. I found one thread that said a girl, basically her dad yelled at her bishop, I think, I'll put it right here. But essentially that he said that you can't cry at this funeral because it shows we don't have faith in the atonement and in the resurrection, and that we'll all be together again one day. And if you can't even be sad at a funeral of your own loved one, of your own parent or a sibling, I think it's going from the idea that positive thinking can be helpful in your life into denying yourself humanity. To say you can never be happy is to deny yourself the lived experience of a human being. This is also for me why real travel has always been so much more appealing than going to Disney. I have not been to Disney since I was a kid. My kids have not been to Disney. I'm sure we'll probably go eventually just because it's something every family does at some point, but we're not doing a yearly Disney trip. I think seeing the world, seeing different cultures, simply just traveling, if we're going to spend $10K, which is about how much a Disney trip costs, if we're going to spend many thousands of dollars on vacation, there's other experiences that are real world experiences, going to see new places, going to see different countries where people are speaking different languages. To me, this is a type of travel that is more valuable in the life of a child than to go meet Mickey Mouse. But as you can tell, I did not get the Disney adult bug. So feel free to argue with me in the comments. I know I may be coming off as a bit harsh. I don't really mean to speak down on anyone's whimsical experiences. But mostly when it goes from being like, oh, we did this fun thing a few summers ago, into an obsession, then it becomes a little bit more something that's worthy of criticism in my mind. The next reason I have as to why Disney and Mormonism go together so well is because of the family-friendly values. And I realize that's kind of in tandem to this idea of sanitizing things. Until recently, there was no alcohol permitted at Disney at any of the parks. There's also no smoking permitted. There's no swearing in the movies. Obviously, the parks and the movies are meant for children, so they're all PG, which is why people think it's so funny when there's Disney adults. This is also why Disney movies were so common at BYU. Watching rated R movies is against the rules for Mormons. This is something, I didn't see my first rated R movie till I was an adult. My first rated R movies was Schindler's List, which I had always wanted to see, but since it was rated R, not allowed, I saw that after I left the church. This is also why Mormons invented Clear Play. There are other versions of Clear Play, but that's Clear Play in my mind is the most famous, which basically will take a movie and remove all of the bad parts. You can set different settings, so you can toggle remove violence, remove sex, remove language, and it's actually I've watched a few different movies on Clear Play that you just don't know the plot, where during some violent scene, a major plot point is revealed, and then the Clear Play will just skip it. And so you never find out that such and such and such and such are actually related, and it ruins everything or whatever. But it's what makes Disney movies so easy, is that you just go into it knowing it's going to be A-okay, family friendly, no swearing. You're not going to have to turn it off halfway through because of some inappropriate scene. And so I think that's one of the reasons, at least, why Disney movies were so common at BYU. I'm going to read from this article. This is a opinion piece that was published by The Daily Universe, which is BYU's university magazine. And he says, "During my time on this campus, I have heard way too much about Disney. Yes, their shows and movies were part of my childhood, but then I grew up. For whatever reason, it feels like no one else got the memo that 95% of their content is for children. Am I the only one who didn't catch Peter Pan syndrome?" He goes on to say, "BYU culture is already interesting enough, but adding Disney worship as a layer to that equation just makes things much stranger than they need to be." And so I'm not the only one that got a little fed up by the Disney obsession, Disney Mormon Mania at BYU. I actually remembered these pictures, so I had to show them off. This was an activity I did of my own accord. This was not a church-sponsored activity. This is just something I did with my roommates. We found this basically like knockoff Disney princess generator, or I guess maybe just a princess generator. But these are some of the princesses I generated during my time at BYU. I could only find 3. I couldn't actually find the one that I made of myself, unfortunately. But as you can see, I was like personalizing the hair, and I think most girls probably had an experience of playing with a website like this where you get to like accessorize a doll on the screen or whatever. But the idea that I was designing Disney princesses as a college student, I think just shows, I'm designing Disney princesses, I'm watching Disney movies, me and my roommates are talking about what we want our Prince Charming to be like. I mean, if they publish an entire opinion piece about it, it's obviously a little bit of an obsession over on that campus to just never-endingly be talking about Disney. I also remembered how at one point I walked in and so PG-13 movies were always in the gray area because some PG-13 movies were too inappropriate, and sometimes that you could watch a PG-13. Usually it was like a peer-reviewed PG-13 movie. So if you know, your bishop was like, oh, well, that one's okay, you'd feel morally absolved and you could just watch it and enjoy it. But there was this one time where a group of people were watching a movie called Pitch Perfect. Maybe you've heard of it. And I remember leaving halfway through because I couldn't feel the spirit, because there were a lot of inappropriate jokes. And when I was remembering that story, I was like, oh, that must have been a rated R movie. But then I was like, no, I don't think I didn't watch rated R movies. And I Googled it and it was only PG-13, but I feel like my visceral response to how bad that movie was, that I literally had to get up and leave, made me feel like it must have been rated R. Like I got duped into watching a rated R movie because I literally left halfway through due to the jokes in the movie. But I think that just underscores how sensitive I was to bad media, that I would leave during a movie and it wasn't even a rated R movie, it's only PG-13. Another reason why I think Mormons love Disney is because of the gender roles and the idea of the damsel in distress and the Prince Charming and the love, you know, the way the love works and the way that romance is presented in some of these movies, especially specifically classic Disney, like a movie like Cinderella. I feel like having girls watch princess-only content is like its own form of brainwashing. I think it's basically gender indoctrination, especially at such a young age, and specifically if the girl is never really exposed to any other versions of girlhood or being a woman. I think almost all the content I watched as a young Mormon girl was about basically princess feels sad, man saves the day, rescues her from tower, girl falls in love with man, happily ever after. Very simplistic storyline. There's no like hero's journey that the girl gets to go through. It's mostly just that she's saved by a man. And I feel like if you're raised in a religion like Mormonism and only watching media and movies like that, you really are heavily indoctrinated to see yourself as basically like the secondary character in your own life, that you're just always looking for a man. And I think that's also why it's so hard on Mormon women. For those who happen to not get married or stay single, it's basically seen as a personal failing, because if your whole purpose is to get married and that's the thing you haven't done, then few things, even just when I was at girls' camp or talking to my friends in the church, not going on dates and not getting married is seen as one of the biggest personal failures possible. This is also why not being able to conceive or bear children or get pregnant and have children, all of those things, any level of infertility is also seen, even once you get married, as another personal failing. Because really, if your whole life it's held up as marriage and babies are your two divine roles in life, if you're not succeeding in one of those, if it's not just like, wow, I got married at 18 and now I'm 25 and I have 5 kids, anything outside of that, I think is something that a lot of women hold as a personal failing. Also, just growing up, there were so many comparisons in young women's lessons between the journey of a young Mormon girl and a princess. So I was taught I am literally a daughter of God. God and Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother had sex, they created spirit babies, and one of those spirit babies was my soul. And so there's a lot of conversation about how you're literally a daughter of God, which means you're like a princess and you're looking for your knight in shining armor. And there's a lot of conversations about like being worthy of your prince and what you're looking for out of your knight in shining armor who's going to sweep you off your feet, and being virtuous enough for him. On the flip side of the girls who don't get asked on dates as often or don't get married as young as some of the hottest Mormon girls. But basically the flip side of the Mormon girl that's not pretty enough is at BYU, there was a trend that Mormon girls from BYU would try to go to California over the summers to become Disney princesses. And I watched this video about what that process looks like. They ask for your measurements, they give you the up down. She was like, they literally line us up and then say who gets to stay and who has to leave. And they go through all of these different levels of eliminating the girls that aren't personable enough or aren't pretty enough or don't have the right measurements. And I'm guessing this is pretty common for like what a beauty pageant usually is. But I do remember talking to a few girls who were Disney princesses in the summer, and also talking to the men in my congregation or hearing the men talk about those women. And like they were literally like the prize of the congregation. Like if anyone was going to get married on the quick, it was the girls who were hot enough to be Disney princesses. And so I feel like there's this huge emphasis put on simply beauty, on who can be the hottest, who, you know, if you're not pretty, how many dates you're going on. And it's all just like, it's about being acquired as property. Who's the shiniest piece of gold? Who's going to get added to the man's treasure chest? There's not a lot of conversation about a woman's intellect or her value detached from her beauty. I feel like in Mormon dating, which is very similar to a lot of Disney movies, it's like, is the princess, if she is anything, she must be beautiful. This is rule number one of a Disney princess, is that she must be beautiful. And as proof of just how deeply the Disney princess complex is rooted in the mind of a Mormon girl, I present to you this song. It's titled I Need a Man, and it's meant to be sung to the tune of Part of Your World from The Little Mermaid. I'll sing a few lines from the song, but if you want to read all the lyrics, I'll link it below. It goes like this. Look at my smile, isn't it great? Wouldn't you think that I'd have a date? Looking at me, yeah, you think, sure. She's got everything. I've got toothpaste and mouthwash aplenty. I've got hairspray and makeup galore. You want to go Dutch? I've got a 20. But who cares? No big deal, I want more. I want to be where the elders are. I want one for my eternal companion. One who's not afraid of, oh, what's that word again? Commitment. In seminary class, you don't get too far. Dates are required for real romancing. Hoping for an engagement. What's that word? Ring. I'm losing the tune here. A guy who's fun, a guy who's cute, a guy who'd look really good in a suit. I'm really great. Why don't I date? I need a man. I'd read more of the lyrics. I'll put them off to the side here if you want to keep reading, but it's the thesis of the song is still the same, even if I were to finish it. You get the point. Also just the idea that she's just like, why won't you like me? I have makeup galore. And so for me, there's just a real parallel here between how Mormon girls are taught to view marriage and men, and how Disney princesses are viewing the princes, especially in the older movies. I think this is why my favorite Disney movie was always Mulan. It's one of the few Disney movies I watched as a kid where the girl literally has to take on the persona of a man to be valued. And I think that rang true for me growing up. There's also a part in Aladdin that I really liked as a kid where Jasmine says, I am not just a prize to be won. And I really felt that as a kid too. I feel like even though I obviously was able to get married and some, people would ask me on dates, there's something still about just being treated like the most important thing about you is being pretty. And I always just felt like there's just literally more to me than the way I look. I also feel like even if you, like I said earlier, even if you're the shiniest piece of gold in the treasure chest, you're still just a possession. Even being the prettiest girl in the ward, you're still just being valued for a very one-dimensional aspect of yourself that in 20 years will likely vanish or diminish at least some. And I just think that valuing women simply based on the way they look, it's just so insulting. Whether you are pretty or not, whether you are conventionally attractive or not, to be valued simply on your appearance is just disgusting. I don't like it at all. And I found that in my experience with Mormon dating, it was very much a Disney experience where everything was about the way you looked. And there was, even like in The Little Mermaid, he's just like, he doesn't get to talk to her. There's no like relationship based off of like a shared mutual interest or something. She's just pretty. That lesson to me that the most important thing about a girl is how pretty she is incredibly dehumanizing. As you can tell, I have a lot to say on this subject specifically, which is why I made it into, I added more thoughts into my Patreon video, which is about the Mormon Disney Princess Complex. It's already posted if you want to hear more of my rant. Now for my next reason as to why Mormonism and Disney go together so well, my next item on the list is that it's expensive. I've alluded to this a bit throughout the video, but to me, the fact that Disney is expensive is a feature, not a bug in Mormon culture. I think that going to Disney, especially for many days, getting food, buying food from Disney, the parks for every meal, doing all the special experiences where you meet the princesses one-on-one or whatever it is they're doing over there. I think being expensive is the point because it's a huge flex to be able to afford that for your family. According to this website, this is just a blog that is about Disney. They estimate that for a 4-night stay to Disney, for a family of 3, that's about $5,000, family of 4, about $6,000, and for a family of 5, it's about $7,000. They say that if you're doing some of the more expensive trips, which is usually what the influencers are doing, for a family of 4, it might be $8,800, and for a family of 5, it could be as much as $10,000. Disney cruises are also really popular and can be really expensive. For the shorter trips, it might be around $2,800. A 5-night average is $7,700, and if you're doing a higher end cruise in a luxury suite, it could be as much as $20,000 or more. I showed this article earlier about going into debt for Disney. I think it's really sad that a lot of parents feel so much pressure to take their kids to Disney that they have to go into debt in order to cover the cost of the trip. My family growing up did not have enough money for a Disney trip, which is why I've only been to Disney once in my life. I've never been to Disneyland. I've been to Disney World once as a kid when we were visiting relatives in Florida. And that to me was like, wow, I'm finally here. Orlando. I was really excited when we got to go to Disney, but my husband's family, they did a Disney trip every year. And he said, this is like a common story in his family, that when he was around 7 or 8, he had already been to Disney so many times that he asked his family to stop going because he was sick of Disney, basically, because they had gone so many times. He basically was like, if we're going to go on vacation, can we go to a new place to experience some new part of the world? And I think a reason why Disney is so popular amongst Utah Mormons is that there's a huge prosperity culture. There's this linking of if you're more righteous, you have more money. If, the more God blesses you, the more economically, how more economic prowess you'll have. And so if you can go to Disney for 5 days with your 10 kids and do every single one of the expensive activities they have there, the specialized things, and you get the perfect Instagram picture in front of the Disney castle with everyone with perfect matching shirts and the huge smile, it really sends this message that your life is perfect. Not just that your life is perfect, but it's perfect in the most Mormon way imaginable. I'll get more into influencers and Disney in a bit, but I really think that these types of pictures, this type of content, being able to show your family at Disney in this way that's so perfectly wholesome, but also shows you have so much money, is the example of what a lot of Mormon families are trying to achieve. Mormonism really teaches that visible prosperity shows how much God loves you and is blessing you, and that blessing is conditioned upon your righteousness. So, I think that the perfect Disney photo really just shows God loves me because I'm really righteous. And that's a huge reason why it's so desirable. Aside from this idea that going to Disney is basically just like a Mormon keeping up with the Joneses act, I also think that another parallel between these two companies is that they are billion-dollar industries selling happiness at a very high price. So we already talked about the cost of Disney. To be a fully active temple card carrying member of the Mormon Church, you have to pay 10% of your income, which is also a huge price in order to show that you are fully active to the church, and to, you even have a special meeting with your bishop called tithing settlement. I think they changed the name, but it's basically the same thing, where the bishop asks you, I experienced this, even kids do it. The bishop stared into my eyes and said, "Are you a full tithe payer?" And I had to quake in my boots and be like, what if I found a dime on the floor once and I forgot to pay a penny to the church? And that's a yearly event where they ask you on the honor system, do you pay a full tithe? And I think this idea that a corporation is making you pay through the nose of, thousands and thousands of dollars in order to sell you happiness, in order to say, to get to the happiest place on earth, daddy better bring the bacon. In order to have a temple recommend, cough up 10%. And that's how you know you're righteous, is if you have a temple recommend. That's how you know that you're being a good parent, is if you can pay for Disney. It's basically this financial transaction that they have orchestrated and manipulated people into saying, if I can make this financial transaction, if I can get into Disney, if I can pay my tithing, I'm good. I'm a good parent. I'm righteous. That's a pretty intense level of manipulation in my mind. And I think it's pretty immoral for corporations that have billions of dollars to manipulate people into paying so much money in order to feel happy. I also listed the history of racism as a reason to draw parallels between these two organizations. Historical Disney films often present highly racist depictions of Black people, Native Americans, Asians, even just in the history of the company itself. It was very hard for women to get work there as anything other than secretaries. Women were not allowed to do a lot of the early animation, and Black people were not able to get jobs in anything other than janitorial staff. And so there's a long history of racism at Disney. This is similar to the Mormon Church. As I've talked about in other videos, there was a ban on Black members of the church from receiving the priesthood and from receiving all of the ordinances in the temple till basically the late 70s. Considering that the civil rights movement started in the 50s, it's clear that the Mormon Church held on to their racist ideas for a lot longer than the rest of the country. One can make the argument that, they're just a product of their time, but when you're claiming to be literally the Church of Jesus Christ, the standard to which you're going to be held is going to be much higher, honestly, than just the general populace or what culture was doing at the time. You would think that the Mormon Church would be at the forefront of the civil rights movement. They'd be leading the battle for everyone to have rights, rather than tailing at the end of it and only changing because social pressure got so extreme, and the worries around things like losing tax-exempt status finally drove them to change their doctrine. Mormons also literally do have their own racist cartoons. I just did a collaboration with JW Panda Tower. It's not released yet, but subscribe to make sure that you see that in your feed. But we reacted to some of the Jehovah's Witnesses cartoons and some Mormon cartoons. I'm going to post that soon. But just to say, here's a few examples of Mormons depicting the white-skinned, righteous Native Americans versus the sinful, dark-skinned Native Americans, which is part of the Book of Mormon. Here's the verse that says dark skin is a curse. And so really both Disney's cartoon portrayals and the Mormon Church's cartoon portrayals, there is a strong tone of racism, which also is another example of this whitewashing and sanitizing of these stories rather than confronting this history head on. The church has now named Dallin H. Oaks as the new Mormon prophet. Two quotes from him. He said, It is wrong to criticize leaders of the church, even if the criticism is true. And he also said, the history of the church is not to seek apologies, and we do not give them. And so the church has never apologized for its racist past. Rather than apologizing for the ban on black members, they really, in my opinion, just try to pretend it never happened and move on and use people of color in their marketing materials and use basically diversity as PR rather than facing the reality of what they did to black members of the church by banning them, by apologizing, by doing more bridge building. I also wanted to talk about Mormon influencers and how they feed into this Disney mania. Here's a quick clip from Jane. She's the Utah mom, and she's made some comedy sketches about being a Utah mom at Disney.
Look at us in our matching shirts. I can't believe we're here. We're getting in Castle Bay.
No.
Yes, we are. Smile. Pirates is only a 10-minute wait.
Smile. I think she does a really good job. I actually have another video where I talk about her comedy, and I think she does a good job at showing like expectation versus reality of, in this case, going to Disney and being like, everything's going to be perfect, but then you're just kind of mad the whole time because having the expectation that it will literally be perfect means that you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. And of course, they have matching shirts. They're gonna wait in the incredibly long line to get the perfect picture. And as I noted at the beginning, just about every Mormon influencer has made content about Disney at some point. Some of them make content around Disney yearly or twice a year. To name a few, we have What About Ob? She's the one that named her new baby Disney, literally. Most of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives women, and I'll note the people I'm about to list have varying levels of how Mormon they are, if they're attending every week or if they're not as active in the church anymore. But we have this video of Whitney from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. She's also the one that's on Dancing with the Stars right now. And anytime I interface with family content, I always watch the faces of the kids, and the kids look so done. They look so bored or even annoyed in this video, and the parents meanwhile are like dancing, and it's almost like you see the kids are there, but you're mostly watching the adults. But if you think about the child's experience of having to film a TikTok 5 times to get it right while they're at Disney and it's supposed to be for children, so often in this type of content, I feel like the adults are like really happy and the kids look like it's not like their 17th take of the same video and they're super bored and annoyed. We also have Michaela. This is a What I Ate While I Was at Disney. We have Brooklyn and Bailey going to enjoy Disney. Here's a video from 11 years ago titled Come to Disneyland with the Shaytards, and it has 2.6 million views, and of course we get to join them on their journey throughout the park. Ironically, the most famous Mormon influencer, Ballerina Farm, I looked her up to see if I could find any Disney content she's made, and I found this picture, which is actually from her husband's Instagram, and then there's comments saying like, I know that this is a Disney cruise, and on this Reddit thread, people are basically saying that because Disney is kind of the opposite of the whole like pioneer homesteader woman vibe, that she didn't post the Disney trip, even though most of their travels they're posting. I think they went to Ireland. They've gone a lot of places and they're always posting a ton about it. But the only content we made from the Disney trip is a single photo of a stateroom posted on the husband's Instagram account. And I just think the idea that because Disney is actually counter to this one very specific person's persona online, they didn't post about it. But the Mormon urge for Disney is so strong that they still had to take a Disney cruise, even if it wasn't for the content. I do think one of the more deceptive aspects of influencers going to Disney is that often it's paid for, that it's a brand ambassador trip. And so the reason that they can go do all of these big, exciting things at Disney, like all of the special dinners and stuff like that is because it's free. I mean, they probably do also have the money for it. They might have even been paid to go on the trip in some cases, but it creates, which is kind of the problem with a lot of influencer things, is that it creates this illusion that, oh, like Disney is so attainable. A 10-day trip to Disney is so attainable. You know, this is the standard for being a good mom, as a mom content maker or a family vlogging content creator. But then the way in which they were able to go is not going to be the same as the average person watching the content. So usually I would think that often they do disclose the partnerships, but I think the way that it distorts reality to make it feel like, oh, this is so normal for families to go to Disney all the time, and it's so accessible and it's so achievable, so maybe if you can't do it, you should just put it on your credit card. I think it can feel a little like creating this perfect illusion that is really out of reach for a lot of people. In the Ruby Franke documentary, they talk about how Disney opened the park early for them, which is really rolling out the red carpet, and that they got to go for free. This is a quote from Sherry Franke in this article. She says, "Disney World paid for us to go there for free, and they opened the park for us. I felt special and it was fun." I mean, even just this idea that Disney would open the park for them, and then when they're there, Disney, it looks, you know, it's kind of like when you see the fast food burger advertisement and it's like perfect, and then you get your burger and it's so measly. The idea that you're creating content in an empty park is kind of not representative, because when normal people go to the park, it's going to be really crowded and the lines are going to be really long. So anyways, just that, unsurprisingly, that for a lot of the lifestyle influencers, the lifestyle they're presenting is pretty inaccessible to the average audience, but they're also kind of selling you on paying full price for that lifestyle. Here in our final chapter, I'll share a little bit more of the history between Mormons and Disney. I already talked a little bit about the man who helped create Mickey Mouse. Walt Disney himself apparently is the one who designed Mickey Mouse, but this man, Floyd Gottfredson, is the one who did the comic strip for almost 50 years. And I'm going to read a few quotes about how he helped with the character development of Mickey specifically. According to this article, Jeffrey Bloom, a writer who specializes in animation art, wrote, "Gottfredson's Mormon upbringing and his unflaggingly positive outlook, positivity at any price, made him the perfect keeper for this icon, never complaining, choking back his hurts. This is the ethic he brought to Mickey. Gottfredson's mouse combines the virtues of a good citizen and a good soldier." And so I think it's funny in that quote they say, like, he basically made Mickey more Mormon. And even this man, Gottfredson, according to this article, it seems like he kind of opened the door to other members working at Disney. Others were hired over time. And according to this article, they also rose through the ranks relatively quickly because their morality and their life view was compatible with Disney's mission. Walt Disney had a admiration and a respect for members. It says, Walt Disney had a great admiration for the church, Larson said. He respected the self-reliance of the Mormon people. He knew his Mormon employees would give a honest day's work and would get the job done. And so it seems that Walt Disney was aware of Mormons, at least enough for other people who knew Disney to make quotes like this. We don't have any direct quotes from Walt Disney about Mormons. We do know that Walt Disney gave permission for one of his films to be used by the church. This is a film called The Grasshopper and the Ant. He gave permission for this to be used in a Mormon movie about self-reliance and to promote their welfare program. And so we know he even went as far as giving the rights or giving permission to the church for his films to be used within their own media. Another example of this is that Fantasia was used in early temple films. If you've followed my content or watched this video, you know that in a Mormon temple, there's a portion where you watch a movie. And so it wasn't always this way. Back in Joseph Smith's time, no movies, right? So they used to just act out and pantomime and have the lines memorized, just kind of like a play. During the temple, you'd watch the performance. But then around the 50s, they decided to start having an audiovisual presentation and have it be in film. And so a member of the Mormon Church was tasked with basically digitizing this religious ceremony so that it could be watched on film. And as part of this, they got permission from Disney again to use Fantasia within the movie that you watch in the temple. So the movie in the temple is mostly the story of Adam and Eve, along with some other things, the creation story. So they used to use a portion of Fantasia in the temple to depict Adam and Eve. Though initially Disney said that the church could only use this portion of the film for 5 years, this permission was renewed year over year until the 90s. So Fantasia was in the Mormon temple for decades, which is kind of crazy to me. The most famous Mormon employee at Disney was a man named Don Bluth. He directed a movie called The Small One. This is the story of Jesus's birth. So this is the most inherently and obviously Christian film ever made by Disney. He is also known for his work on Robin Hood and Winnie the Pooh. So obviously this is a lot of names. This is a lot of members of the Mormon Church who worked at Disney through its most transformative years of going from a very small team of animators, a very small company, to becoming a worldwide sensation. This is probably what led to the Mormon Nights I mentioned at the beginning, where here I'm just going to flash across the screen some of the flyers, because this lasted for a long time. 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I tried to find who started the program, why it ended, really almost anything about it. And I found like basically comments of people saying, oh, that was so fun when we could do that. But I didn't really find anything authoritative as to how it started or why it ended, you know, who at the company was making sure this was happening. All I could find was basically that the tickets were discounted and that they would close the park early for general admission, and they would make it so that it truly was a Mormon night and only members of the church were allowed to go or permitted to go during that time. I do think that here in 2025 and even in the last 10 years, the relationship between Disney and Mormons has become a little strained as Disney has turned woke, as some people accuse it of becoming. Some religious people, not just Mormons, but even just any other sect of Christians, have boycotted Disney for the portrayal of gay characters or lesbian characters, for maybe having too many feminist storylines. There's been a lot of objections in the last 10 years, and not even just on the topic of woke characters, as they say, but also just that Disney is having things like Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is another nail in the coffin, as the portrayal or the willingness of Disney to potentially poke fun at, or some would say mock, Mormons has really ruffled some feathers and has made people feel like Disney is not being respectful. We have Dancing with the Stars, we have Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, we have the Ruby Frankie documentary that was on Hulu, we have Under the Banner of Heaven. So there's really quite a few different moments in which Hulu or Disney, Hulu is owned by Disney, are choosing to platform and create media that is not always just so sparkly, you know, happy-go-lucky as maybe some of the more historical Disney characters that so many Mormons know and love. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please feel free to drop a comment if I missed any connections between Mormons and Disney. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. As I said, I have a Patreon video about the Mormon Disney Princess Complex, which I could go on about for days and days and days. It's already posted if you want to check that out. It's available on Patreon now if you want to keep the party going over there. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next week.